Before we get started with today's podcast, we'd like to ask returning listeners to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you really enjoy it, share a link to this podcast with friends or family who would enjoy hearing our weekly discussions about basketball and basketball culture. Now, on to the show.
Jim, isn't it amazing when Michigan can keep this game to a 19-foot, 9-inch game inside that three-point line? It's all theirs. Nice move by Steve Fisher here. Turn it into the 19.
Tales from the Bench is back on the 19.9 podcast. I'm the Chucker, 19.9's resident historian, and we are thrilled to have former Providence Hooper Ryan Ford on the show today. Ford was a part of one of the most memorable teams in Providence history, the 1987 Final Four squad led by Coach Rick Pitino and a hot shooting guard named Billy Donovan. In this installment of 19.9's Tales from the Bench, Ford discusses that magical run to the 1987 Final Four. He shares his favorite Billy Donovan memories, explains the genius of Rick Pitino, and mixes in a tale or two about a young Jeff Van Gundy. Let's welcome in Ryan Ford. Ryan, thanks for carving out some time for 19.9 and joining us here on the podcast.
Hey, my pleasure, Danny. Glad to be talking with you, and I really appreciate you thinking enough of whatever my experience was to warrant a podcast.
Well, that 1987 team, really, really memorable, kind of futuristic in many ways. And, before we kind of go back to the past, I want to start in the present because you're still in the Northeast, you in the heart of Big East country. And one of the interesting things that's happened during this pandemic ridden college basketball season has been the legacy Big East teams playing on campus because there's no need to kind of play in these massive arenas. So St. John's isn't playing at Madison Square Garden, but on campus at Carnesec Arena. Georgetown's playing at McDonough Gym. Villanova's at Finneran Pavilion. And Providence isn't at the Dunkin' Donuts Center, but rather Alumni Hall. So let me get some thoughts here. Are you up or down on this? Do you like the return to campus?
I really love it. I think it adds so much, and especially from a Big East perspective, having been, around in the 80s when the transition for so many teams was to get off their campus and into these bigger arenas, and to see where we used to practice. So if we played Georgetown and we were going to practice there before we played them in the Cap Center at the time, we would practice in McDonough, and same with, the Walsh gym at Seton Hall. And, the on-campus is where a lot of times we had to practice. So to see it, now being where the games are played is I think really cool. I will say the one thing though about it, when you ask the question, I personally have a real pet peeve with these images of people, these pop-up of people's in the chair. I think it is the stupidest thing and takes away from it. Embrace what it is, man. They're playing in their home gym and just let it be. But I get it. They got to make money. All those people that are pictured are probably paying a couple $1,000s to have their picture on TV. And, there's a lot of revenue being lost. So I get it. But I wish they didn't have to do that. I really do.
There's something cool about playing in a near empty gym, and having these, kind of elite D1 athletes, and it's just empty, and it's just the purity of
it's raw.
Just the game. There's none of the other nonsense. It's just the game between the lines, man. Let's go.
Hey,
it's kind of cool.
I can't draw on a feeling of being a player that was significant on the court. Okay, I can't. So I'm not going to pretend I do. But there's something about watching these guys and knowing my teammates back in the day that if you were actually playing a game with no fans and it was just about just you and your guys in a gym, like it was pickup, but it really counts now. I don't know. There's something about that would really inspire me. And I'm just assuming that's what a lot of these guys are feeling.
It's interesting. I think one of the things I kind of sometimes wonder if it's easier to judge talent right now. You find out, if I'm an NBA GM and I'm looking at the college kids or I'm looking at potential free agents, I'm finding out the dudes who are, for lack of a better term, they're badasses. I'm finding out the guys who are committed to the game. They don't need all the puff. it's just throw the ball up and let's go, And I got to imagine there's a little bit of the insights that you were coach too. We'll talk about that later. I got to imagine I wonder how much this weaves into it, if it's easier to see.
I think you're hitting on something that is real genuine, because I think you can't hide passion when, the guys that really care about winning are showing up in a way where their self-motivation is on full display. They're not motivated by the crowd. They're not motivated by, impressing people that are in the stands. They're literally playing to win and for their teammates. And I think that does reveal like some character talent, that is certainly something that NBA scouts are looking for.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So all right, man. So we talked about the present. Let's go to the past. And I want to talk about your time with the Providence basketball program in the 1980s. So let's just start real simple, man. How did you end up as a walk-on on the squad to begin with?
Yeah,
Where did you come from and how'd you get there?
Yeah, really fortunate. I grew up in a small town south of Buffalo, but it's a basketball town. St. Bonaventure University, Atlantic 10 team, great tradition, Final Four team from the 70s. My dad worked at the campus. I was raised essentially on their campus and around their basketball team. When I was in high school, their head coach was Jim O'Brien, who went on to Boston College and then took an Ohio State team to the Final Four. He lived across the street from me, and he was literally an idol of mine growing up. And I just had a great passion for basketball, always around the team, always in the gym. And at best, I was a Division II player. In my senior year, I was set and ready to go to Stonehill. I hadn't signed anything, but I loved their campus. I wanted to go to New England, and I loved their team, their coaches. And pretty much I told them I was coming. And at the end of January, I tore a ligament in my knee. And basically, I went through a very challenging time of my life. Now, Jim O'Brien, who was at Bonaventure at the time, had basically helped me saying, look, you're going to need a year to kind of get healthy again and get re-recruited again. He had some connections at Worcester Academy up here in Massachusetts, and he helped me, get to Worcester Academy to get recruited again. And as the story goes, I got there the first month I was there. I basically tore the same ligament again. I was like partial torn initially, fully torn now, and I was pretty much done. It was going to take me a good year to get back. In those days, it was, they cut my knee wide open. Today, now they're scoping that stuff. This is 1985. So I was like, I was heartbroken, and I knew I wanted to go to school in New England. And he was helping me at the time get to Boston College as a manager. Gary Williams was there at the time. And what was really interesting, I had been accepted at Providence, and I was waiting to kind of find out some stuff at Boston College at the time. And Pitino takes the job at Providence all at the same time when Gary Williams was leaving to go to Ohio State at the time. So I would prefer, I liked Providence's campus. I knew of Pitino from 5-Star. And I had a good, close family friend that worked in the Big East. And I said, hey, can you find out if he'd let me be a manager? And if so, I'm going to Providence. So that's how I got at Providence. I started as a manager my freshman year. And that entire year, my freshman year, just kind of being around it, I knew I wanted to coach. That was like my goal. I alluded to, Jim O'Brien being an idol of mine. And I wanted to be like him. And I wanted to coach college basketball. And so, I got there, figured manager under this, guy, Rick Pitino, who was so highly sought after. I loved his energy from 5-Star. I figured that would be a great way for me to get started. And my entire freshman year, I was in the gym trying to rehabilitate my knee. And, kind of coincidentally or fatefully, Billy Donovan was in the gym every day too, trying to, kind of transform himself into the player Pitino envisioned him to be. So we were in the gym literally every night, me working on my knee, trying to get in shape, loving the game, wishing I could play. And, we were just working out every night, and that was my whole freshman year. So we forged a great relationship, obviously, that year. And when I came back to school as a sophomore, figuring I'd be a manager again, we had a couple injuries. We had a transfer that was ineligible into the second semester, Delray Brooks, who wound up, being a key player of that team. And then we had a player transfer. So here we are, first week of October, and season's going to start in 2 weeks. And they're like talking about, we need a walk-on. And so there was a walk-on tryout, but I know I was kind of queued up because I know Billy had put a plug in to Pitino's ear, that I was a good player, and because we had been working out for so long. And lo and behold, that's how it rolled. That's how it happened. I wound up, the first week of practice, October 15th, converting from being a manager to being a walk-on on the team.
So I want to go back to two things you talked about there, or you mentioned there. One was you had known Pitino from 5-star, or at least been exposed to him and kind of seen him at 5-star. So what were your kind of impressions of him from that? And then when you're around him on a regular basis, how does that change and shape? And so what did you think of him initially? And then what did you think of him as you got around him on a more regular basis?
Well, his energy was magnetizing to me. There are some people that maybe it's not, but the one thing I remember about 5-star is, first of all, the Garf, Howard Garfinkel, who started the camp, when we'd have these lectures and people come in and he'd introduce them and he'd just go on and he'd glorify all these people. Well, here's this guy at the time, he's 30, 31 years old or whatever he is. And he's been a head coach and now an assistant with the Knicks. And he walks into the building and all the kids are chapping, they're cheering him on. And his passion, energy, and confidence, they stood out like I had never seen it before in my life. I can just tell you, like, I just never seen someone walk into a gym with a level of confidence and the way he could capture, I'm talking 500-700 kids, all these college coaches that are there recruiting, all the counselors. You could hear a pin drop. And the guy was just so confident, passionate, energized, like challenging the best high school players in the country to play him one-on-one in front of 700 people. And he's 30 years old and he's killing them. And I'm just like, who has the confidence to do that? I had never seen it before. And so it was magnetizing. And, I had no idea how fateful that experience was.
Shout out very quickly, 5-star. 1990 is a nice relationship with 5-star, so we know it well. The second thing I wanted to get to that you talked about was Billy Donovan's transformation. Because one of the things I think people know, Donovan became, an all Big East performer, kind of the star of that Final Four team. But his first 2 years at Providence, he's fairly marginal. I mean, he's unremarkable. Yeah. I mean, he averages about 3 points, in about, 12, 15 minutes a game, give or take, between his first two seasons. Not going great. So what was his transformation? What did you observe?
Well, I think
in your knee. What did you see from him?
There's a couple things that I can look back on with a little more clarity. But I can just tell you that his first couple years at Providence, he it's not like he wasn't capable, because obviously he proved that later. But the style of play was huge. They were a bring it up slow, feed the post. There wasn't a 3-point line. So it's not like you're sitting out there and people are actually saying, hey, this is what we got to do is knock down these threes. And there was no press. You weren't pressing. You weren't playing 7, 8, 9, or 8, 9, 10 guys. They were playing like 6 or 7 guys. So it was hard for him to get out there. He was a freshman and a sophomore. There was upperclassmen that were ahead of him and obviously better in that style of play. I think what happened is Pitino came in there, and like he has the unbelievable, I would say unparalleled skill to do, and this is Pitino now, he can infuse this level of inspiration within you that if you can connect with it with him, it's unbelievable what he can do for your confidence and how he can encourage you and then challenge you in a way that makes you dig deeper than you realize. And I think Billy has a depth, a passion and a love for basketball that he has demonstrated. Let's face it, what he's done with his career is rooted in that passion and his commitment. And I think Pitino was able to tap into it, and Billy was able to respond to it because of his capacity for work and his confidence that he gained in the style of play and the role that Pitino gave him. That's what I would say is really the bottom line.
Gotcha. That first season, you're there as a manager, Pitino's first season, Donovan's transformation beginning. So that's the 1985-86 season. That ultimately ends for you guys in the NIT. You're respectable 17 and 14. It's a 6-game improvement over the previous year. But what did you recognize and what caught your eye about that season? Because it seems like there was some momentum going, and Pitino had kind of established a culture.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I'll tell you, it's funny you would ask that specific question, because I do recall vividly kind of I don't know if it's an epiphany, but a thought that I had towards the end of the year. Because one of my responsibilities that freshman year was keeping the book at the scores table. So, I felt like I had to be concentrated on the game and watching the game because I was keeping the book. And I came to this realization about halfway through the Big East that we had not lost one single game that year that we were expected to win, or that you could say as a 50-50 game. If we went into it and we were like a team that was like just like, whoever plays better will win, we won. And if we were supposed to beat that team, we won. And then every team, when you went into it and said, they're not better than them, they're not going to win that game. We didn't win that game. We just did not, and so, but we played close. We were competitive. I mean, I'd have to go back. I'm sure we got blown out of a few games here and there because the Big East was, an unbelievable conference. But it's not like we never really embarrassed ourselves or whatever. Like, people knew that in Pitino's first year that, Providence was going to be a tough out. They were in it. They were going to be there to the end. The defense was going to be, the pressure was going to be at you all game. They were going to try and go at you on offense. So I feel like that's what I realized, is that, Pitino was not going to let this team lose any game that they had the physical ability or the strategic, upper hand to win. And, that's what I realized and remember about that game, and it set the stage big time for the next year.
Yeah, so let's kind of jump into that then. Let's jump into the 1986-87 season. You guys are going to end the season in the Final Four, but did that even seem a realistic expectation at the start of the season? I mean, you had this momentum going, but did you really think like, hey, we're a Final Four team?
I mean, that momentum is relative. We're talking about a team that, like, think about prior to Pitino, they hadn't had a winning year, in a long time, and they were a bottom, dweller in the Big East. Now, the Big East was only 8 or 9 teams at that point. It became a 14, 15 team league over time, but they couldn't get out of the cellar. It was like, the Big East tournament, there was an 8-9 game, you had to play into the real tournament, and Providence was losing that game on a regular basis, not even like feeling like they were part of the Big East. So I think that, to have a team that, like, all of a sudden they have a winning record overall, I'm pretty sure, you may know better, I think we were 500 in the Big East, or just slightly below it, maybe 6 and 8, something like that. But
maybe 85-86 season, you guys were 7 and 9, yeah. Okay.
So I knew we were close, but that was like a big deal, and because they're not in the 8-9 game, and so now, like, anyone that thought that we were going to the Final Four that year, there's just no way. I mean, I think people were just like hopeful that we could be an NIT and bubble NCAA team. Our sights were just, let's get to the tournament if we can, and I think that was the expectation. So, I think I'd be lying, and I think anyone else associated with the team would be lying if they said, hey, we think we can go to the Final Four.
Yeah, well, we appreciate your candor. So one of the things you talked earlier in terms of Billy Donovan, you talked about style. But one of the things that happens in this 86-87 season is this is the first college season with the 3-point shot. So how did that impact things at Providence and kind of fit into the team's playing style? How did Coach Pitino adopt that and weave that into what you guys were doing?
Yeah, I think that's where I really believe this. That's what allowed for the Final Four to happen. What you just said. It's a combination of Pitino's expertise and his unlimited viewpoint of how he can drive you and make you think you can do anything in the world. That's a gift that he gives all of his teams. But he also had the experience of the NBA of playing with an NCAA or with a 3-point line. And it's not just that, like, you can look at that and look at basketball today. Everyone, how they use that line, it's just grown in terms of what happened, even in the NBA. But he knew two things. Number one, when you can get 3 points percentage-wise on the number, and versus the 2 points, that especially for a team that wasn't overly skilled with going inside, and he had already installed the pressure defense where you were getting more possessions and you were picking up the tempo of the game. All that he had put in play. And now what he was able to do offensively is aggressively attack with a 3-point shot, knowing that if we can just shoot a certain percentage, we're going to score more points than we had ever scored before with more possessions. But then I think the other thing that he really helped, and he's a genius around, is the spacing that the line allows to teach within your offense. He really helped us spread the floor, spread out defenses, create driving lanes, forcing help. And that does a lot of things, because if you force help from a big man, you're giving maybe a lesser skilled big man on your team versus the other, the Patrick Ewings of the world that have been in the league, and other great players like Ronnie Cycli and Derek Coleman and other great players in the league that are really talented inside. We didn't have one of those guys. But if you force them to help because of the spacing, now your big guys are going to get dumped down passes for layups. Or if you're helping from the perimeter, you're getting 3 points on that shot instead of 2. And he really helped our team understand that, embrace it. And no one else in college basketball that I can recall, and I think there's a lot of people that would say this that have been around the game a long time, Pitino embraced the 3-point shot more than any coach. Everyone else, there was a people that said, "Hey, I'm upset that there's even a 3-point line. We're not using it." And then there's other people that they just didn't know how and were afraid to fully embrace it because they never knew how to coach with it. Where here you got this guy that's saying, "This is unbelievable. We're going to press. We're going to jack it up. We're going to take more threes than anyone in the country. We're going to shoot a higher percentage. We're going to create," like, he helped us fall in love with that. And then when you start winning and, it's energetic, and that's basically set the tone for what allowed the Final Four run to happen.
I got to imagine internally at the team, you guys are 21-year-old guys, 20, 21, and I got to imagine you're jacked about that. Like, this coach is saying, we are going to do something that nobody else is doing, because at that point in your life, you're okay being a little bit of a rebel. You're not dying anytime soon, so you're okay going against the grain. I got to imagine you guys just embraced that. You were like, let's go.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it, because that's what we were good at. Number one, really the strength of our team was the perimeter shooting. And I would go as far as saying that our front court depth at that point, we had 2 freshmen that had never really played before. So they're relatively skilled. They're long. Marty Conlon wound up being a longtime NBA player, and he was a very cerebral, smart player that could finish. And he's coming off the bench now. And then we had two centers that were, one was a junior, one was a senior. One was pretty skilled and a good soft touch shooter. The other was from Poland and 7 feet tall and rugged and could just finish closer to the basket. And then Abdul Shamsuddin was a freshman who was long and raw and just could run and press and could foul other bigs. And it would, because he's a third center, we had 15 fouls at our center spot every game. And so it allowed for everybody to kind of participate. He's playing 11, 12 guys in a pressing game. So the guards are jacking it up. Dave Kipfer, our starting power forward, was probably the heart and soul attitudinally on the team, if that's a word, attitude. Like his attitude was really Billy was the leader and certainly the maestro, and he and Dave were best of friends. And Dave didn't say a word, but I tell you, like the stories we tell about Dave Kipfer setting a tone on our team of toughness, durability, and relentless effort. I mean, like those are all the things that came to life with Pitino's vision for the team, and he tapped into what everybody was good at and made sure that everybody was able to participate because of the style of play.
Yeah, that's being a badass in the Big East is hard too.
I'm telling you, Dave.
That's a league of badasses.
I'm going to tell you, early in the year, okay, we're at a tournament Thanksgiving, and we're playing Tulsa. They have like Steve Harris, who wound up playing in the league. Nolan Richardson was their head coach. And he says to Billy before the game starts, we come in after like you have warm-ups, you go in like the 6-minute mark for a break before you go back out. And he says to Billy, I don't think we're ready to play. And Billy's like, what are you talking about? He goes, look around this room. I don't think we're ready to play. He goes, I'm going to start a fight. And he's like, what are you talking about? He goes, watch. So the game starts, and he kind of forces this tie up under the basket and in front of the opposing bench, and kind of like fakes like this extra aggression with their big guy. And like, he wasn't really fighting, but he was like forcing the guy to retaliate a little bit. So the officials will kind of run in on him. And as soon as that happened, he runs from the commotion and starts just throwing his hands up in the air and bumping into the other guys on our team, getting our fans to get excited, and just starts change the whole tenor of the game. And that's what I mean. Like guys like that on our team were responding to the energy that Pitino infused with our style of play and the expectation that he had for the team. And that's the momentum that started at the previous year. And that's happened in the first week of the 86-87 season. And I think those are the little things that really set the table for the success the team had.
And, we've talked a lot about Pitino here, but I want to just pause for a moment, and I want to tell the folks who the other assistants were on that team, because this is an amazing staff. Go ahead.
It's legendary, really. So when Pitino took the job, he hired a head coach from Manhattan College to be his associate head coach, which is more common today. But back then, that didn't happen anywhere. That was Gordy Chiesa. And Gordy Chiesa, while he's probably the least known of the people I'm going to mention, I can just tell you, he's the one that took over as the head coach when Pitino left to go to the Knicks as the head coach after 87. And then he wound up being an assistant for the Utah Jazz for 20 plus years, with both Frank Layden and Jerry Sloan. And he's highly respected in the business. So he was the associate head coach. And then Stu Jackson, who obviously went on to be the head coach of the Knicks, Wisconsin, Vancouver Grizzlies, a vice president in the NBA for years, and currently the senior executive that runs basketball for the Big East. Herb Sendek was a 23-year-old graduate out of high school that ascended with Pitino at Providence, and then with Kentucky, and now the head coach of Santa Clara, but he's been at NC State, Arizona State, Miami of Ohio. So he's obviously well respected. And then you got Jeff Van Gundy, who was a graduate assistant on that staff. And he was basically Stu Jackson and Herb Sendek found him as a high school coach 1 or 2 years out of school. And they were recruiting one of the players, and they just went to dinner with him and were amazed at this guy's intellect. And he wound up being just a young guy on the staff that was very close to all of us, especially me, because we had to match up in practice all the time. So it was a great experience to know him at that age and just see where he's what he's turned into from a legendary announcer and coach.
Absolutely. So Van Gundy, folks know him today as this kind of cantankerous ex-coach calling the NBA games. What was he like as a grad assistant in 1987?
He is probably the most balanced guy that I've ever been around from a disposition.
I did not see that word being associated with Jeff Van Gundy.
And I'm going to tell you what I mean by balanced. Like he maybe consistent might be the better word, because his work ethic's unbelievable. Like he used to sleep in the office, and he'd always have like black rings under his eye from being tired and bloodshot eyes. And, but he would be around it forever, the game in the gym. And he ran all the individual workouts and he got really close with every player. But in practice, like whether you are up by 20, down by 20, that's just what I mean by balance. He never changed his perspective with what he expected from you, with what was going on in a game or what was going on in a practice. He just constantly demanded your best effort, but more importantly, he constantly demanded your attention. You could never wane your attention because Jeff's attention never wanes. Like it's just always there. And it's always about moving the team forward or doing your best. And he modeled it so consistently. And I guess that's what I mean by balanced. You knew what you were getting from Jeff Van Gundy every single day. And he was going to be there before you got there, and he was going to be there after you got there.
Yeah. He still carries the bags under his eyes too.
Well, there's no one that works harder than him.
It's amazing. It's like, dude, you go into TV to have an easier job. Tell us, give us a sense, because Pitino, I know, and I think you could probably speak to this a little bit. He's a skills development coach. There is a work ethic in that program that you were a part of. What was a day in that program like for you?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing when you look back on it. And right now there's a 20-hour rule where players are only allowed to participate 20 hours a week when they're in classes with their team. And we refer to that affectionately as the Pitino rule, because every single morning the day would start with a pre-breakfast 1 hour workout with the team where we literally would run through every single offense. We do a little bit of skill stuff, jumpers here, there, whatever. So we're in the gym 6:30, sometimes 6 o'clock to work out to 7:30, depending on whether you had an 8 or an 8:30 class. And you basically, I think it was usually 6 o'clock, now that I'm thinking of it. We were there 6 to 7 and then had an hour to get to an 8 o'clock class and get something to eat and a shower. But we worked for a solid hour every morning on some kind of offensive strategy, depending on where we were in the season. Either putting offenses in, we were working on, spacing, all this stuff goes in. And it was a full workout. Guys were taped. It's not like you were jogging through anything. Jogging did not exist, that was a full workout. Then between classes, 8 to 3 are the classes, you have your schedule. And anytime you had a 2-hour window in between a class on a given day, it's, either 3 or 4 days out of the week, you would go in for a solid hour of individual instruction. And there'd never be more than 2 or 3 people in your group. And it was all individual instruction workouts, all individual dribble moves, getting shots up, and a coach would always be there with you. And that's where I was referring to Van Gundy. Van Gundy was with us every single day. And you think back to it, like here I am, just this lowly walk-on, and I'm getting this attention from Jeff Van Gundy to improve my game every single day for an hour, and it's like, how do you not improve? Like the guy was 23, 24 years old. We knew how bright he was and how good he was. Now the world knows. You look back on it, like, he was so instrumental in development. And I don't want to sell anyone else short. I mean, Herb Sendek was phenomenal. Gordy Chiesa, Stu, all of them were. It's just that a lot of times those guys were out recruiting or they were preparing for an opponent. And Jeff was in every one of those workouts, and he was amazing. So that was an hour workout before practice. So you got an hour from 6 to 7, an hour in between classes. Then you go from 3 to 6, a 3-hour practice every single day. We were all running to make it to this is one of the things we still joke about today, is how a dining hall closes at 6:30. And we're constantly calling over there. Can you hold it? Can you hold it? Guys are like, exhausted. They only got a half hour to finish practice, get something to eat. And then study hall starts at 7:30, and study hall goes from 7, maybe it started at 8. I should say maybe it was 8 o'clock, 8 to 10 study hall. And then at 10 o'clock when study hall ended, because study hall was in the same facility that the gym was in, study hall ends, everyone came downstairs from study hall and shot 100 free throws. So we finished at 10:30, 10:40, and then it started all over again the next day. That was every day.
Rinse and repeat.
And these players today, They would not even want that. I don't know players today that would want that, let alone, tolerate it if they had to. And there was something about the makeup of this team that embraced it. And I think it also fed the confidence that we had as the year went on.
Well, it shows in the results. So, you guys are 16-3 at the end of January. You cracked the top 25. Again, you mentioned earlier, we're hoping we could be a bubble NCAA team, but now you're the top 25 at the end of January after beating St. John's and Georgetown. The nation is starting to take notice of this team and its style of play. How did that all play internally for you guys?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I think Pitino has always been, every team he's ever coached, very, very good with, is he would tell you to a degree, but I think he demonstrated it, and you learned it more by what he demonstrated. He always told us what he thought was the truth about what we were doing. So one example would be, I remember playing Hofstra, and we beat Hofstra by close to 20 points or more. And you would have thought we lost by 20 points when he was in the locker room, and the way that he chastised us and the way he built up the expectation for what we could expect in practice, the next few days in preparation for our next game, because he was not happy. And I think those are the things that help you understand that he's not coaching you based on who the opponent you're playing. He's coaching you to your ability and what our abilities are. And if we're not performing and doing the things that he expects, then he's going to let us know about it. And that really blocks out the noise that you hear from anywhere else. Because if you read the newspaper clippings, Providence wins by 20, leading scorer this, so if you're one of those players that played really well, or you just want to feel good because you won by 20 and go out because everyone's saying how wonderful you are, you knew when you walked into practice, you were getting your butt handed to you because you didn't perform to the way he wanted you to. And it balances out so much of your perspective. You can't get a big head around this guy because he's going to find a way to help you know where you could have been better. But he does it in a way where you don't feel bad about it. You feel like he's actually trying to help you, and that there's more out there that we can accomplish if you will just listen to me. And I think that's the magic of while we might have been 6-3, and we probably should have been goo goo and gaga over beating St. John's and Georgetown. And he was excited, but he would temper it by saying, this is what we've done all this work for. I known you guys are this good, and now you know you're this good. So let's stay committed to what got us here, and then he'd find a way to humble the hell out of you, and one of the ways that I like to look back on, because it's one of the only few ways that I ever was able to feel good about my game on this team, is in practice. He would glorify anything that I did well, because he could do that at the expense of a player that's much better than me, to say, and then keep that person humble, So it's amazing how good he was at that type of thing. I'm just using it from my perspective, but he did.
Well, did you ever go to him and say, Coach, if I'm doing so much well, how come I'm not starting over Donovan?
Let me tell you something. There is not a player that I know that has ever gone to Coach Pitino. If you think you're going to him, you got another thing coming, brother.
That's funny. So, you guys finished fourth in the Big East, and you head into the Big East tournament. And some folks might remember what happens to Providence and the Pitino family during the Big East tournament. Others aren't familiar with it all. But you guys thrashed St. John's in the quarters, but then you lose to Georgetown in the semis. I want you to, if you could just tell us what happens on the way home, because this is a story I think really shows the spirit of your team. So tell me a bit about that.
It's a very interesting and I think pointed question by you to be aware of it, number one, because it's not a story that I think many people do talk about. And I would say, while I don't mind, sharing some of my insight into it, it's really, really not my story to tell. It's a very personal story to their family, and out of respect to them, and really my affection for their family, both Rick and Joanne, his wife, and their son Richard has become a very dear friend of mine. So it is in fact their family story. But I can tell you that the Pitino, just because it's factual, they had a son that was born at the beginning of the season named Daniel, and he had an illness. I believe it was some kind of heart ailment, but I can't speak definitively about that. And he was in the Boston Children's Hospital, or in a hospital in Boston, really since he was born. And Joanne Pitino went with him every single day to the hospital. I think she was either sleeping there or just there. She just wouldn't leave the son. It was really just an amazingly dedicated mother, because she had 3 boys already at that point. And the son, from what I remember, had been progressing and making some strides. And the first game that she came to was that St. John's game, or because we won that St. John's game. I may be losing some details here, but all I know is she did meet up with the team in New York for the Big East tournament. And when we were returning home, we were on a bus. There's no cell phones, and quite honestly, we did beat St. John's, but we got trashed by Georgetown in the semifinal. We got beat by 20 or plus, and we're going back, and Coach Pitino did a nice job. Like he blistered us, for the way we performed, but he also knew this now Sunday morning, and we're driving back. The Big East, the NCAA tournament selection show is that night, and we were going to go back to campus, and we were going to get dressed and changed up, and then we were all going to go to his house to watch the selection show, which obviously we knew at that point we were getting in. So, he was very upbeat about that, and we were all excited about that moment. The way the story rolls out is that, Rick and Joanne Pitino on the front of the bus, and we're driving back, and we're driving up 95 through Connecticut, and we get pulled over by the state police. And they basically, escorted them off the bus, and they were informed at that point that they had lost their son. And it was a very, very traumatic experience to watch them, get into this. No one had any idea what was happening. We just, it's not like today you'd have your phone up and you'd look for the news and whatever it is, whatever was out there. But there's no cell phones, there's no nothing. They literally drove them to a pay phone, and where they made a call, and, we saw some emotion there, of course. And we knew someone was up, and everything changed at that point. And, really the next time we saw him, when the team all went to the funeral that week, very, very emotional to see him and be able to embrace he and his family at that time, because we really had not seen him all week. And then the first time that he was with the team to coach us was when we went to Alabama, Birmingham for the first round game. And that's the first time we were with him. And it was really an emotional time for everybody, and just an amazing piece of the story that probably isn't something that people would recognize today.
Did you guys kind of rally around that? It seemed like so many of you bought into what Pitino was selling, and gleefully so. And it was demanding, and it was hard work. And I would think there were some players here and there who would cursing him out here and there for how demanding it was. But was there a sense of rallying around the coach at that time?
Yeah, I think that I'll answer this.
Or that it brought you together, I should say, too.
Yeah, I think that if you remove the fact that this happened, I know from the Providence perspective, there is not a player that played for him at that time that wouldn't have done anything in the world for him, because he has this ability to make you a believer in yourself and a believer in each other. And then we experience what we experience. So we were believers because we were winning, and everyone felt like, everyone was happy, and while we talked about how hard we had to work, I think people embraced that. Our team embraced that, and I don't know if we were, delusional or what, but I mean, it was fun. I mean, you learned a lot about yourself, each other, and you had to love the game. Otherwise, you don't want to be there. And I think we had a team that loved the game, loved what he brought to us, and therefore were behind him. And when that happened, you take the foundation of what I just said, and you can't help but want to, just give your heart to the man and to the family, because you could see the pain they're in, and you understand, and you can, not knowing what it's like to lose a family member, I could only envision it, and it was painful enough. So I couldn't imagine what they were going through. And here he is, I'd say, probably having the greatest success. He's 33 years old, I believe, or 35. He's 35 years old at this time. So he's having the greatest success he's ever experienced in his life, and he loses a child. And so how do you, at the time when you're going to the NCAA tournament, so the timing of it all was really amazing. And so when he did, come and meet us in Alabama to be with the team, I think everybody was not only there because we wanted to win. He never made it, never brought it up, didn't want to talk about it, wouldn't talk about it with the media. He didn't want that to be the reason. But I could just tell you the undertone of the affection we had for he and his family, and the passion we had for each other and what we had done so far. It was elevated. It was elevated for sure.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that, Ryan, because, I think that's a key part of the story. And I think it shows the spirit that resonates in some teams that are successful. So as you guys kind of get into the NCAA tournament, you guys beat Alabama Birmingham, ironically in Birmingham. though you're the higher seed, you're playing them in Birmingham. You guys beat them handily.
Yeah, it was like 30 points.
You guys whack them. You guys whack them pretty good. I mean,
here's the reason why I know. Here's the reason why I know. I think I played like 8 or 9 minutes in that game.
Yeah. Hey, you guys.
Here's that 8 or 9 seconds if I'm lucky.
Yeah, 90-68. So you got them. You whipped them pretty good. Then you guys you move into the second round. You play Austin Peay, upset-minded team. You're down to that double digits in the second half, but you guys eventually come back to win in overtime. I think Donovan hits a jumper at the buzzer to force overtime. Tell me about, where did that game turn? Because you're on the ropes. You're going to lose to this upset-minded team. Where did that game turn?
I'll just tell you that about 5 minutes to go in the game, the moment that I'll speak about, it changed everybody on our team's life. Because if you lose to Austin Peay in the second round of the tournament, I don't think Billy has the trajectory of his career, because Pitino would not have the trajectory of his career, and basically, I don't know what we were down. I'm guessing we were down double digits. It was probably 10 or 12 points with about 5 minutes to go, but we just couldn't get out of our own way. And I just remember Pitino calling this timeout. It's legendary timeout within this team. And he ripped into the team in a way that was not demeaning, but had an amplitude of energy that I think probably people could feel, not just hear. And at one point, he grabbed his chest with like veins in his neck and in his forehead that said, "You need to go back out there and pour your heart onto this court," or something to that effect. But it's the way he did it. And it's what he was saying when he got to that, and he just walked out of the huddle. And I just remember the team everyone got together and went back out there, and we miraculously came back. However, there was a player on their team that we intentionally fouled with minimal time on the clock. Like, I probably should know this a little more clearly, but I don't. It's like less than 3 seconds or so. And it was the front end of a one-on-one, and we're down 2 points. And he misses the front end. Now, we had called a timeout, and I remember this strategically, how I guess many people would do it today, but at that age, I just remember it because it was uncommon. Where I know that the staff told Billy to tell the officials that if he misses the shot and we get the rebound, we want a timeout immediately because we didn't want any shot time to go off the clock. It's not like the clock's managed like it is today. There's no TV, there's no buzzers, there's no electronic stuff. There's just a guy sitting over there that has been doing the clock in that building forever. And if he's a fraction of a second late or a second late, you could lose 5 seconds. You're not getting it, or 5/10 of a second. You're not getting it back. So very proactive and said, listen, if he misses and we rebound, we want a timeout immediately. Like blow the whistle the second we have possession. And that's exactly what happened. Guy missed a free throw. We call the timeout. We run the play. They advance the ball full court. Billy makes this play and makes a shot at the buzzer to put the game into overtime. And then we went in and win it in overtime. Now, if down 2, if the guy makes both free throws, we're down 4. We're not winning. And if he had made just one of them, we got to make a 3. And it's, so it was really a telling time. And I think that is really what changed. Like, had we lost that game, the story of the Providence College Friars and all of its members would not be what it is today.
Yeah, no doubt. And so you guys escape Austin Peay. You get an Alabama team with 4 NBA players. You're facing them in the Sweet 16. You get them by 20. I mean, you take it to them. You're on to the Elite 8, and you get a familiar foe, and it's Georgetown. Just 2 weeks prior, they beat you guys by 18. Talk about how you guys approached that game, because that I think just encapsulates the genius and the genius of Pitino, the selflessness of your team. So talk about the approach to that game.
Yeah, I appreciate the question because it basically is the accumulation or really a microcosm of everything about our team, because Pitino knew them well enough and able to watch 3 different games. We beat them once at the buzzer at our place, and they beat us 2 other times when the games weren't very close. So now all the marbles are on the line. We're in Louisville. It's an Elite 8. They got everything going for them. And he basically put us all together, and he just said a couple things. He called Billy and Delray aside to themselves, and he said, look, you guys, if you want to win this game, you guys cannot take shots. You guys cannot be taking a lot of shots. You're going to be decoys in this game. And everyone's like, what? Our 2 leading scorers are, and he says, no, like they have figured out a way to pressure you guys and wear you down. So we're going to feed that. We're going to suck into the way that they're defending you. And it's going to create these alleys. Then the second layer of the decoy is that rather like all of our big guys, much like the game is today, like you either want, close in 2s, right? Or you want a 3-point shot.
Threes or shots.
That 7 to 9 foot area is not necessarily a good shot. But the way they were defending us, because we were on the 3-point line and they had such great length inside that, they could, get to our guys at the rim. He basically, like Marty Conlon was a very good shooter, very skilled shooter as a freshman. And he had played enough minutes that he was not a freshman anymore. And so he was essential. Steve Wright was essential, because he was a center that could make a 10, 15-foot shot. And he put Dave Kipfer, 15-footers he was making all year. So he basically allowed these guys to just step a little further out than usual and have Billy decoy the pressure and Delray decoy the pressure and found these guys for these medium shots. And then we wound up some other guys that came in. Daryl Wright wound up just playing. So Daryl Wright come off the bench and was not a key player, but he had like 21 points in this game and wound up being the MVP of because they didn't key on him. So Billy and Delray were feeding these other guys, and there was enough sprinkled in, and Daryl obviously had an incredible game that it allowed for us to get a lead and then sustain the lead with free throw shooting down the stretch. Billy wound up, I think, making 8 free throws. I'd have to double check, but I think he had like 4 or 6 points with like 3 or 4 minutes to go in the game, and he wound up like with 15 or 16 points.
He actually ended up with 20, and he was 16 of 18 from the line. I mean, it's remarkable down the stretch.
Yeah, it was basically like, so we got the lead with this strategy. And then they just kept the ball in Billy's hands, and they were following him, and he was just icing them at the line, and it wound up being just an amazing story.
And there you see, throughout so much of this, you see, to use your term, the genius of Pitino, in kind of the motivational sense, the skill development sense. There you see the X's and O's genius that really put that all together, and you get a Hall of Fame coach. Because that's a coaching strategy that not many guys are going to say, "Hey, our best two scorers don't shoot."
Well, I'll tell you, I think there's two things that I would say about that. Number one is, it starts at the beginning all year long. Like, he makes every player on the team feel like what they're working for. Like when I described how many hours we put in, the individual instruction, and the coaching staff of Van Gundy and Sendek and Stu and Chiesa that were in all these individual instructions, all those guys that, like the Darryl Wright being MVP, people were working with him every day, developing him. And then he finally had this opportunity. So he has the confidence, and he was able to step, and others, But then I think when you look at it, like the genius of him figuring out and having the courage to say, this is how we win. And I believe in all of you. I believe we could all do this together. I mean, in fact, I've heard Jeff Van Gundy say more than once that is the single greatest coaching strategy he's ever seen. And it was the single greatest coaching job he'd ever seen done from end to end in a season. And I've heard him say that, up until at least the last decade, and I think that he would probably believe it today unless he's seen something else better.
Yeah. And, so you guys, what a great story that you guys get Georgetown. You get back to the Final Four. I think it's the second time in school history. You get to the Final Four, but you can't escape the Big East, and you get Syracuse in your first Final Four matchup. And that's where things end for you. So what happened in that game?
Well, I think that was really, kudos to the Big East because they were so good, but, part of, I think, what really helped us in the tournament is that the teams were not used to seeing our style of play. And until you play against it, it's really hard to prepare for. Now, it helped us against Georgetown because we knew how they were going to play us. But we still had to beat a really good team that was familiar with us. But then when you get to Georgetown, I think there's two things I'd say, when you get to Syracuse, there's two things I'd say about that. And when you get there, is they really knew us well. Their zone was long, and it really put a lot of pressure on us to make shots. And we played in the New Orleans Superdome, and I think there were somewhere around 60,000 people at the game. And it was one of the original domes that was massive, where typically they didn't put the court in the middle of a dome like they do today. Like now they do that and they bring all the stuff down at time. But back then, you'd play when you played Syracuse in the Carrier Dome, they put it on one end and they kind of keep it tight and it doesn't feel as big. But I'm just telling you, when we walked out there to play, you feel like you're in a bubbled city when you look how big this thing is. And we had experienced that other than the dome, but like I said, it was in a quarter of their, a third of what the Carrier Dome is. And I just remember the depth perception, the zone, the challenge of all that was I think something that made it a little more challenging for us. I mean, I really can't make any excuses because had we made some shots, I think it could have been a different game. But we didn't have a great scoring game. I don't know what we lost by. I don't think we were much closer than 8 points most of the game, though. Yeah. I think it was 8 to 12. We just couldn't.
Down by 10 and a half. You guys lose by 14. Yeah.
So it was, and it was hung.
I mean, listen, that Syracuse team's just a good team too. I mean, that had a number one pick in Derek Colbin. That had Sherman Douglas. It had Ronnie Cycli. Those aren't bums.
No, they were. I mean, they were more talented than us, I mean, they were, from player to player, but, we would have loved to have played someone else, Yeah,
and it's interesting because the familiarity with Georgetown, you see how familiarity cuts both ways, because with Georgetown, the familiarity helps you. With Syracuse, the familiarity works against you. But 2 nights later, I just want to have a quick sidebar here. 2 nights later, Syracuse loses to Indiana on Keith Smart's jumper, one of the most famous plays in college basketball history. So, truth serum, how did you feel about that as a 20-year-old watching that?
I didn't have really an attachment to that game very much. I was happy for the Big East, because I love the Big East. I grew up a huge Big East fan. And so I'm happy that they, got as far as they did. But I mean, the Keith Smart's jumper, winning it for them was exciting as a fan, but I didn't really care who won, to be honest.
Gotcha.
No worries.
I didn't know, if you had like the sense of like, I want Syracuse, the Big East, to win it all. You're like, no.
I think ultimately I was rooting for him, but I don't think I was that invested.
Yeah. So when it ends for you guys against Syracuse, give us a sense of what that was like, because this was this euphoric kind of rise for you guys. You said, earlier, I hope we can be a bubble team. And not only are you an NCAA team, you're a Final Four team. And it was kind of this very magical season. You catch the country by storm. You're playing different than anyone else. What was it like when it's over? And it's quiet and it's final.
The term that I think most of us have used, and someone must have said it a long time ago, but it still holds true. The whole year was like lightning in a bottle. And if you think about that, metaphorically, like it happens in a flash, it happens so quick. It's, like if you're in the moment and you're feeling it and you're living through this, that just keeps getting better and better every week. One week was better than the next. And I think the further you go, the more it magnifies your desire to win. Like, so every week you're at the peak of like your excitement and your inspiration to win. And listen, I'm talking as a guy that has no contribution to us winning and losing. I'm just along for the ride, right? So I'm witnessing this. I'm part of this. I'm in the bottle, but I'm definitely not the lightning. How about that? So I'm watching all this happen. So but I know what it feels like because I'm experiencing the feelings like everybody else. And you don't want it to end. You want to be part of it. And, you're all that. And then when it does end, you never saw what it looked like outside the bottle. You were in the bottle. You were experiencing, and it happened in a flash when it was over. But while it was going on, it was just very special feeling. So, when you look back on it, it's shaped, all of our lives. I just know individually how it shaped mine, and how grateful I am that I was so fortunate to be around these people, to be at Providence at that time, and to really have been able to be invited into the opportunity to be on the team.
And I want to just kind of stick on that a little bit because you have another 2 years at Providence and on the program, 88, 89. But that 87 season is the one that really stands out. So what did you personally take away from that season?
Well, I would say that to me, it was the fruition of my own personal, basketball journey and my love for the game. Back to what I said earlier about how, all right, I'm just a guy. I grew up around basketball, loving basketball at St. Bonaventure, and it was just a big part of my life. I played all the time, and I had these dreams of, being able to play in college. And then I had it all come crashing down. I thought it was over. And then I just try and resurrect this passion into coaching, and fortuitously, switch gears at the last minute to go to Providence and wound up being part of this team. So to me, it was a culmination to ultimately become a walk-on the team was just like, I don't know, it completed a lot of my own aspirations around basketball. But what I take from it today, not just the whole story part, is that I tell Pitino this every time I'm with him, I will be eternally grateful for him, because the fact that he was my coach and he tapped something in me that I could have never found, I don't think, on my own, certainly not at that age. Like he actually helped me see what I was capable of as a player, but more than anything as a person, because what he challenges is your emotional and your mental capacities every single day, and physical. So your physical, emotional, and mental capacities are challenged every single moment you're around the guy. And at that age, I was 19 years old, 20 years old. And, you know, what it shaped and taught me and developed in me has totally, you know, set up my life, you know, changed the way I viewed everything in the world. And that is the greatest gift, you know, that he could have ever given me, and any given anybody. And I'm not alone. He does this. You talk to anyone that's ever played for him, if they've opened up to him to allow that to happen, it has happened. If you fight him on it, you're going to stay stuck. But he has a gift, and he's done it for many players. And you listen to enough of them, and you'll hear a very similar story.
Yeah. Well, it's a cool thing to relive. I hope you've enjoyed kind of just walking us through it. I know it is an interesting conversation, and just to hear how this all took shape. I think it's a very memorable team. And, you know, your Friars were known for getting up and down the court. So before we close out the show here, Ryan, I just want to go back with some run and gun style questions to end things here with us. So what was the coolest arena your Friars played in?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think you got to think about the New Orleans, you know, being in the Superdome. That just, you know, kind of stands out. But the other thing that comes to mind is my senior year in 1989, Miami was coming into the Big East, and they didn't have an arena built or didn't know where they were playing. I remember playing them in like a theater. You know, it was like literally like this transformed floor. There was no seats behind one side of our bench, and like this auditorium type thing off to the right. That stands out. I can't tell you where it is, but it's one of the first things that comes to my mind when I think about it.
All right. Craziest opposing fans you encountered?
You know, I got to stay closer to, you know, like Rhode Island is a crazy state. Okay. And I would say that most people that play, most of the opponents at Providence, they'd say, like, I know Villanova coaches because I was familiar with them from my brother happened to be a manager in the Big East at the same time at Villanova. And I know their coaches used to say all the time, it's the worst place to come play is at Providence. And I would say the same is true for University of Rhode Island. I mean, I think that, like, when we play them, it's like venom. You know, and then UConn is a close second because that's a huge rivalry there too. So UConn and URI fans were probably the craziest that we played against because I think that there was just such
a heated rivalry. Yeah.
Such a heated rivalry, those two.
Yeah. All right. Well, the team your Friars least like to play?
Yeah, I would say Syracuse. You know, the zone, how long they were, we never beat them. I mean, the first time, I'll never forget, it was the year after I graduated. So it's 1990 season. Eric Murdoch hit a shot in the dome at the buzzer to beat Syracuse. And that was the first time Providence ever beat Syracuse.
Yeah, such an odd team to play. Now, you know, so many teams play zone, but back then, I mean, Bayhi was one of the few. So,
yeah.
Most impressive opponent?
Opponent as a team or a player?
You could take it either way you want.
So I think that what comes to mind is a moment of a game that is probably one of the most memorable moments I've had. It was my junior year. We were playing UNLV at home, and they had this like pogo stick jumping rocket man, Jarvis Bass Knight. And I will never forget him coming down the middle of the lane in front of our bench and hook dunking a left-handed dunk. I swear to God, his shoulder was parallel with the rim he must have left at the dotted line or foul line somewhere and just jumped over the whole team. And I would love to see a video of that someday, actually, because that's just the way I remember it. It might not be as significant as I remember it. It came out of nowhere, and I just don't ever remember seeing something like that in a game.
One of the great things that I think happens in college basketball is we get to see things, or just all sports in general, see things we haven't seen before, and they stick with us. One word to describe Big East basketball in the second half of the 1980s when you were there.
Oof. Relentless. Gauntlet comes to mind. You know, it was never a night off. You know, and it was so physical. I mean, the game was officiated differently back then, and the Big East was a place where the official, I mean, it was physical. It was a bloodbath, and it was fun.
All right. So we're going to end it with one more. Your favorite Billy Donovan memory.
Oh, man. The ones that I can talk about out loud or publicly? I think the most significant, I've shared this story more than once, but there's no story from me that embodies who he is and kind of tells the tale. The year that he graduated, I think he's a couple years older than me, but the year that he graduated, he was drafted in the 5th round by the Utah Jazz, and he stayed in Providence in the summer, and we were all working out together as a team, and he was preparing for his training camp. And it was a Friday afternoon. He's from New York City. Marty Conlon's from New York. And I was going back to Billy's house. He was dropping Marty off. We had finished this workout. So we went in to shower, and Marty and I were going to wait. We were going to go with Billy, right? So we come back out, and Billy has this ritual after every workout. He would do full court dribble moves and pull up for a 3-point shot, have to make it, and then get his rebound and go back to the other end. And he'd have to make 10 in a row. And his workout was not over. Now, we had already worked out for a solid 2 hours. Whatever we were doing as a group, going at it, full sweat. The rest of us, we go in, we shower, and he's going to do his ritual. And, I've seen this for a long time now. I've seen this ritual, and he's usually done in 5, 10, 15 minutes. This particular day, I don't know what was going on, but he'd get to 6, 7, 8, 9 makes and miss. And, come back out after the shower, he's still going. And he's still going. And he's still going. And most people, just because he's done it for so long, he knows how many times he has made it 10 in a row, would just be like, all right, I got these 2 guys waiting for me. It's Friday. The later we leave, the more traffic there is. I've made 10 in a row so many times. All right, I made 8. All right, I'm done. I'm going to go. Would not leave until he made 10. He was there for 1 hour and 20 minutes at least till he made 10 in a row. Now, I'm not saying that because, he couldn't make 10 in a row. Like the guy does it all the time. He would not leave until he made 10 in a row. And to me, that just says so much about his commitment to the way he works, the way he thinks. He was going to stay. He knew he could do it. He just had to stay long enough to do it. And it's my favorite story just because it just helped me really appreciate the depths that he's able to work. He's uncommon. He's just got an uncommon ability to work that hard.
Yeah. Well, let's end it there, Ryan, and let you get on with your day. Appreciate joining us here on the 19.9 podcast.
I appreciate it. Thanks for reliving the memories.
All right, man. Well, thanks, of course, to Ryan Ford for sharing some tales from the bench. And thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in. Visit 199.com for some of the flyest college basketball gear around. And subscribe to our podcast for more shows celebrating basketball history and culture. Until next time, this is the Chucker signing off.